Greedfall. Do you like brown? Do you yearn for a 17th century friend zone simulator? Well, join me today as we take a look at this action role-playing game released in 2019 by developers Spiders. I for one had no idea that Spiders were that organised. For a spoiler-free look at what qualities the game has to offer its players today.
Oh, it's going to be one of those.
My name's Mitch Mannix, and this is Greedfall, a masterful mess. As always, to kick things off, it's to the character creator we go. And Greedfall doesn't exactly spoil the player with options on customization here, but after more recent videos I can't help but feel a little bit relieved. Oh dear lord, what have I done? The sound used for changing options is a bit jarring, and if so inclined, can be used to simulate electroshock therapy in a hair salon. Oh, don't look at me like that. So with our iteration of our hero confirmed, we begin the game's introduction, and with it, our adventure. If that face doesn't say excited, I don't know what does. In Greedfall, you play as Desade, and he is employed as the legate of the merchant congregation. A line you'll hear repeated to the game's inhabitants so many times, it's no wonder they're walking into walls. Desade, along with his cousin, are travelling to a newly settled island, where his cousin Constantine will act as the governor of the congregation's capital on the island. Before setting off, the game gives the player a number of main and side quests to complete, introducing elements such as stealth,
Top hiding place, lads.
lockpicking, and the game's companion system. The early hub of the game does showcase that as a smaller development team looking to hit the tone of 17th century Europe, Spiders have put a lot of care and attention in the design of the game's environments. What unfortunately also becomes apparent quite fast is the rather janky feel to the game, with spelling mistakes in NPC dialogue, some questionable NPC pathing,
Enter, please.
Made. Power down.
and some downright confusing idle animations. What is he doing? One man Mexican wave? No. Is he doing that Numa Numa dance? No. Ah, there must be a tiny man behind him pinching his ass. After a fairly typical set of starter missions, we board the ship to the new world, and that's where Greedfall really decides to put its cards on the table.
The beast has awoken!
This rather unexpected boss encounter completely caught me off guard, and you know what? Scored some real points for the game initially, showing that the combat not only had some greatly satisfying impact and attacks, but also that Greedfall is not holding back with its challenges, as even this encounter right at the start of the game is quite punishing. Upon arriving in the new world named Tier 4D, the game proper begins, which consists mainly of working through a number of main and side quests, visiting the game's 3 cities along with various locations out in the sticks, as well as the camps and settlements of the natives. The game does touch upon the historical hostilities between the colonial forces and the already established island natives. And during its runtime, the player will be expected to make choices, both on how the quests are completed, as well as through dialogue that will impact the relationships of the game's 6 factions. The reputation system works well for the most part, choosing to stealth through a native camp to avoid conflict, and with it reputation loss, using the intuition or charisma skill to talk someone down, but at times can become quite irritating, being docked reputation for that faction you've been working hard to gain rep with when encountering unavoidable developments in the questing journey. This is especially annoying later in the game, when reputation does have much more of a part to play with how the story plays out. The factions themselves, while not exactly having a cast of memorable characters, do at least hold some identity to them. The Nort Pirates, who all look like they've fallen victim to practical jokes while drunkenly falling asleep at a frat party, and the Donigada Island natives, with a fictional language so complex that even the voice actors themselves struggle to pronounce it. The voice acting as a whole is good and impressively constructed for such a small developer, and the characters themselves come across as convincing, if not too memorable. But it has to be said that the facial movements when characters are talking doesn't exactly add to the immersion, with faces looking more like they're trying to fart out a pine cone than actually conveying what they're saying.
The officer sent out a small party hoping that they would be able to solve the problem.
And where were you? Oh, I just went to go drop a like on the video, my lord. You beautiful bastard. As previously mentioned, other janky elements can be found in the NPC pathing of the game, which frequently leads to characters walking themselves into getting stuck in the terrain.
I'm the legate of the congregation. I'm the legate of the merchant congregation.
Which for the most part does lead to some funny moments, but can even cause some game-breaking issues.
It's this way. Come on.
Come on. Oh, what? Nice. Come on. Where are you escorting me exactly? Get off there. Come on, Jesus. Unstick his ass. Gonna be watching you, buddy. Oh my god, you've got to be kidding me. The combat in the game follows a similar style to games like Mass Effect or Dragon Age, with real-time combat coupled with the ability to pause and queue up abilities. A steer away from this style with Greedfall is that you don't actually have any control over your companions in this menu, but it does allow you to strategize on the fly during encounters. Combat is split between one- and two-handed melee weapons, guns and rifles, as well as a very light range of magical abilities. There is enough in the combat abilities to keep players interested during the game's runtime, as long as you respec into some alternative builds once in a while, as if not can become quite repetitive and cumbersome while taking on waves and waves of the same enemy type over and over. That unfortunately being a bit of a theme with Greedfall, as about halfway through the game you will have encountered nearly all of the enemy types and location styles the game has to offer, and will simply be a case of mostly rinse and repeat. Even the bosses that are actually really fun the first time round are just recycled later in the game, with only one or two new faces appearing down the line. The bosses themselves, as with the one encountered at the very beginning of the game, are challenging, and can take and dish out some punishment, which can lead to bumping into one of them out in the world underleveled, a bit of a rude awakening. Me, being a bit of a glutton for punishment, really appreciated the fact that the bosses packed a punch. For those that want a challenge can get stuck in, but those that maybe want more of an easy ride can return with some better gear and a few more levels under their belt to beat them down so bad that they morph into another dimension. Although recycled, I had the most fun in Greedfall with the game's bosses. That is, the one that the game intends to be so. I'm not, however, talking about the real boss of Greedfall, the one that no one talks about, that being...
A shrubbery!
Yes, that's right. I can't tell you how many times I got blinded by bloody shrubs and other bollocks during combat encounters, given that Greedfall, unlike most third-person action RPGs, doesn't add any transparency to objects between the camera and your character. So you have to get used to avoiding shrubberies like the plague, not to get smashed over the head even when locked on, while being blinded by these leafy bastards and other nonsense. Gear in the game follows a fairly typical structure of trickle-feeding upgrades as you work your way through the story, with nice touches such as being able to wear the same uniform as a faction guarding an area to slip by unnoticed, as well as utilising the deconstructing and upgrade system to alter gear to fit more to a chosen spec or playstyle. Your companions can also be outfitted with gear to increase their effectiveness, and each comes with a set of stats that level up as the player does, in addition to each companion having a special ability, and a set range of weapons and armour they can use. Fine-tuning companion gear to get the best out of them was another of Greedfall's highlights for me, but it would have been nice to have a little bit more control over their actual stats as they level up, rather than just a static increase. And even the companions themselves don't escape the game's more janky moments. If you're thinking of starting up a romance with any of your comrades, then be warned, as the game will expect you to pick exact dialogue options or be instantly friend-zoned for the rest of the game, even when the choices of options themselves could easily fall under the NPC-imping category. Overall, my experience with Greedfall was mostly positive in the first half of the game, but started shifting once I realised that it didn't really have anything more to offer in its latter half. Most of the zones all look very similar, with a very brown-focused aesthetic, and there's clear copy and pasted key structures in the cities, and also a fair amount of time with the game will be spent backtracking over already explored areas. The combat, while feeling good to begin with highly satisfying impacts and the chance to try out a range of alternative weapon options, felt great for a time, but again didn't really feel flushed out enough to keep things interesting throughout, unless as previously mentioned you plan on respecing every once in a while to something completely different. The story is okay, with certain more gripping moments, but later in the game feels heavily padded out, with seemingly mundane tasks being stacked on top of more urgent objectives tying into the main plotline. And I can't say I was exactly blown away with the game's writing once the credits were rolling. There are some standout moments within the game's campaign, as well as some entertaining side content, including an arena to take on various waves of enemy forces for quite a tasty reward.
Don't take advantage of the deal and try to beat the champion. If you do, he'll wipe the floor with you.
LOL. And being able to complete quests in a variety of ways did also add to the game's enjoyment while taking on the main and side quest content. Side quests in particular were oddly quite heavy on what they uncovered about the game's lore, and arguably should have been part of the game's main content, perhaps being swapped out with some of the padding to tidy things up a bit. It's worth bearing in mind that for such a small studio, Spiders have actually done a lot of good work here. The game's environments, although not exactly varied, had moments where the visuals were outstanding, The game's sound design, as well as the cinematography of the cutscenes, sits above a hefty amount of AAA competitors. Not having to load into houses or caves gives a nice flow to gameplay, and combat, especially boss encounters, do have their fair share of enjoyable moments, as long as of course you're able to deal with
Another shrubbery!
Greedfall is very rough around the edges.
Honestly, what is going on with this man's head? Is that a hologram?
With not just visual and NPC bugs, but also more game-breaking ones, such as a quest early on that in my run bugged out and ended with me not being able to complete it at all. The performance of the game also has moments where it struggles. I played on an overclocked 3080 and a 9700K, and had moments where the frame rate dive-bombed into the 20s for seemingly no reason. The game lacks charm and does fall off in its latter half, and I feel more could have been done with the magic system in the game, aside from the handful of skills the game provides. The quality in the questing fluctuates massively throughout. But with all that in mind, the game may do enough to be a worthwhile distraction if you're a fan of RPGs like Mass Effect and Dragon Age and can grab it on a discount and have already experienced those games and are yearning for more of the same. Just don't go in expecting the same level of quality as in those titles, both in its storytelling and its actual performance. What Greedfall does do is make me interested to see if the developers will take another swing at the genre, as they did hit the mark on some of the elements that make a truly standout experience, and although Greedfall for me was quite mediocre, overall Spiders did showcase skills that with adding a few more ingredients could be capable of forging a competitor for the next blockbuster RPG experience. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a like and let me know your thoughts down in the comments. You wouldn't believe how much that helps out small YouTubers like me. When it comes to content like this, I'm just getting started. There's a bunch more up on the channel and so much more to come. So don't forget to subscribe to the channel to get notified for every upload and to join what's turning into such an awesome community. Thanks again, and I'll see you guys in the next video.